Okay, so before we start, I know that horror is a subjective thing. I know that what might scare you, aka success, might not be the same as what scares me, aka writing a list without an overdrawn intro. But here's the thing. The entries on today's Sermon on the Mount are truly without scares. You have nothing to fear from these spectacles of ridicule, and today we're going to laugh long and proudly in their faces. These are games which took the horror rulebook, flipped through it, and then went out on the piss, such as their command of the medium. So don't go expecting any tension, any creeping fear, nor really anything of note except for my comic stylings, which are truly the real horror show here. So with this in mind, I'm Ghouls from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror video games that totally failed to scare anybody. Number 10, Alien Colonial Marines. So, just like when my parents decided to have more kids, let's get the disappointing entry out of the way first. Colonial Marines has topped many of our neggy vibe lists in the past, and with good reason. It was absolute trash. What should have been the ultimate horror shooter was reduced to a quivering pool of waste, with its broken AI, ridiculous enforcement of being able to kill the xenomorphs easily, and level designs with less going on in them than the Pope's love life. The only thing it truly succeeded in was not succeeding to elicit any scares from its audience, who saw through this generic action title and laughed all the way to the tip to throw this out with the rest of this shit. Number 9, Silent Hill Homecoming. Now, there's nothing worse than seeing a series you once loved go downhill in terms of quality, and Silent Hill has been rolling into hell for better part of a decade now. Homecoming for me was just the moment I packed it all in. Gone was the intrigue built over the first 3 games, and in its place were enemies that were for the most part unoriginal and only really existed to try and gross out its audience. One of the main issues with the game was that it totally f***ed up the sense of empowerment that horror games are meant to take away. You want someone to feel scared? Well, then make it so that they can't physically overpower the monsters around them. It's simple stuff. But Homecoming decided to sack that age-old philosophy off and was a very combat-heavy title. As a result, there was no fear, and many gamers subsequently had no love for this game. Number 8, Friday the 13th, NES version. Okay, just putting it out there, this game was bullshit. It was hilarious in many ways, though, what with its swimming speedboat Jason and terrible music, but utter bullshit nonetheless. Basically, you play as a squad of counselors and you need to, you need to do something. The game never really tells you what. But to be fair, you won't really make it very far until the Movine murderer comes and twats you right in the puss. It never even came close to scaring people, what with its neon-coloured background, the fact that it's set in the daytime, and that it's been rated as one of the worst NES games of all time. Luckily, the new Friday the 13th game seems to be rectifying this mistake in very bloody fashion. Number 7, Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Resident Evil 3 marked a significant change in the overall tone of the franchise, as the game was much more action-focused rather than well-paced tension and spooks. And that's not a bad thing at all, but it kind of led us to this. Operation Raccoon City, what many consider to be the worst entry in the entire franchise. Why would you ever think that it would be a good idea to turn a survival horror into a generic third-person shooter? Other spin-offs from the main canon at least kept up the premise of overwhelming and deadly odds, but with Operation Raccoon City they made everything seem like a joke. Oh, what's that? There's 30 zombies over there? Don't worry about it, mate, I'll just mow them down. It's not like they're a huge threat or anything. They should have just titled this game as Resident Evil Operation Rambo Complex. Ooh, that was a bad joke. Number 6, Fatal Frame Maiden of the Blackwater. Considering how genuinely frightening the first 2 games in the Fatal Frame series were, and that many of the original team worked on Maiden of Blackwater, there really is no excuse for how poorly this title handled horror. What killed it was repetition, that you would visit the same number of small areas again and again, killing the suspense as your brain gave way to a "come on, show me something new" type of feeling. There were a few moments which teased us with the prospect of some oohs, but they quickly turned into ehs because of their sheer sense of predictability, which the game seemed to wear proudly. Every scare you thought you were going to get, you got. And where's the fun in that? That's like all my victims knowing that I'm hiding under the stairs, and then I've got the awkwardness of having to make small talk as I reveal myself. And I hate small talk. Number 5, Condemned 2 Bloodshot. There's a sequence in Condemned Criminal Origins in which a deranged serial killer is chasing you through a series of winding corridors. It really is terrifying because it feels like he's right behind you, hot on your heels, ready to slice you up into pieces. You know he's there somewhere in the darkness, but you can't really catch a good glimpse of him, which makes it all the more frightening. In comparison, in Condemned 2 Bloodshot, one of the penultimate confrontations in the game is between you and a reanimated suit of armor in a brightly lit museum. As you can see from this comparison, these two are not the same! The grit was gone in the second game, and while it did have a fair few jump scares here and there, the overall experience was about as scary as afternoon tea with your nan in South Softington, the most cushioned county in Devon, on a no crime or anything remotely frightening day. Number 4, Alone in the Dark. See, the remake of Alone in the Dark should have really renamed itself Sometimes Alone in the Often Well Lit Firefighting Edition, because that's basically all you do, fight fires left, right and centre. Need to clear an obstacle? Light a fire. Fire in your way? Well, move an object on top of it. Enemies trying to attack you? Well, talk to them about fire safety first and then die because the combat mechanics sucked. The story saps any sort of tension out of it with this weird insistence of playing out like a TV show, with cliffhangers and recaps between each segment. This does make for an interesting style, but when you're being shown events that just happened, or characters speak in ways which sound like final lines to the corniest show ever, it removes any sense of fear that might have been evoked from the player. Also, the driving sections can off and go dunk their head in a sink. Number 3, Night Trap. Despite all the controversy surrounding the, how do I put this? Poor excuse for a porno setting and abduction of young woman game, Night Trap is absolutely bollocks. It's a piss-poor game which feels stilted and is only worth a play to experience the god-awful, air quotes, acting. Yet it marketed itself as a horror title in all of the lead-up to its release. And while on paper saving people from abductors could be indeed seen as a horrific premise, when you see the dumpy, idiotic creatures that are trying to nab these babs, it becomes a complete laughingstock in mere seconds. Number 2, Dead Rising 4. Right, I know what you're saying, but Daddy Jules, the Dead Rising games have always been silly and don't make me scared. And you know what, you're totally right there, kiddo, but the games have always marketed themselves as being survival horror with comedy added to it. It's why pretty much all the trailers up until 4 focus on terror and then led into comedic ways to kill. Dead Rising 4 shit itself hard though by trying to make a comedy game with horror thrown in. That shit don't work and makes your title look about as incompetent as it gets. There were no laughs to be had in this winter land and even less horror. So what are you, Dead Rising 4, other than a huge disappointment to me? And number 1, Five Nights at Freddy's. Right. So here we are, and FNAF is at the top of this list. And no doubt that's made a lot of heavy-handed commenters engage their caps locks to tell me, in probably much greater detail, how wrong I am about this choice. Now, I'm not saying this to stop you, by all means waste your own time, but I just ask that you listen for all of a hot minute while I explain why it's here. When this game first came out and before it had been spread over every teenager's Let's Play channel like a disease, it held the ability to make people jump again and again. Yet it was because of this rise to popularity that it became nearly impossible to separate the game itself from the groans you have to stifle when someone brings it up. The issue is that it's become so ingrained, much like Slender before it, that it no longer becomes scary. We're overexposed to this content, and now if I were to watch or even play the game, it would only ever elicit the mildest of reactions. So why has this title faded so quickly compared to more enduring horror titles? It's because the experience never changes. It's the same locked-in position stance, it's the same resource management, and while future titles did dress this up differently, this is, at its core, a sit and scare in hopes for a scare simulator. Again, call me wrong, but unlike this game and its bizarrely toxic followers, I am getting out of my seat and going to find better and scarier things. You're welcome. And that's our list. Got any other horror games that just failed to scare you? Well, let me know about them in the comments section below. And why not swing by WhatCulture.com for more news and articles like this every goddamn day. As always, I've been Jules, you've been awesome, and I'll speak to you soon.
Look, my son. Look at the marvel that I have created. Look at the quality fabric hand-stitched by blind orphans. The perfect letter spacing calculated so meticulously that Rich Hudson had an erection for months about it. And a colouring so deep that I had to buy the dye off the dark web. Oh no, the beast has grown angry, angered by our drab fashion choices. I am such a fool to think that it wouldn't try to infect us with its perfect design. Quick, we must do something to appease the beast. Why don't we buy one from shop.whatculture.com? Look, it's already got Scott Nash. Oh no! Shop.whatculture.com! Quick, let's go and buy one right now! Let's go buy one right now!